The steam rose from the soup like silent ghosts. At the corner table by the misty window, a small child held the spoon with hands that trembled more from fear than from cold. His dark eyes weren't looking at the food but towards the door, like a scared animal waiting for its predator to appear at any moment. The woman behind the counter said nothing. She never did. She just slid the hot plate onto the scratched table and returned to her pots, pretending not to see the marks on the child's arms, pretending not to notice how he flinched every time the entrance bell rang. The restaurant smelled of used oil and stale hope. Flies danced lazily around the yellowish lamps while outside, the city continued its indifferent rhythm. Nobody else seemed to see the child who ate as if each bite were his last. Nobody else seemed to hear the silence that screamed, louder than any words. She cleaned the same glasses over and over, waiting, always waiting for something to change, for someone to ask, for the world to stop spinning so fast that it couldn't see what was happening at that corner table. The clock on the wall read 3:47 p.m. Like every day, as if time had stopped in that place where secrets were fed as much as hungry bodies. But that day, something in the air was different, something neither of them could yet imagine. The silence that had protected them for months was about to be broken forever. Maria Elena Vasquez was 58 years old and had hands that knew every scar of that small restaurant. She had seen governments come and go, rainy seasons that flooded the street and customers who came hungry for food and company. But she had never seen anything like Diego. The boy was 8 years old and always arrived at the same time, always with the same expression of silent terror. He asked for nothing. He simply sat at the corner table and waited. Maria Elena never asked his name. She found out when she heard a woman shout at him from the street, "Diego, come here right now." The boy had run off as if the devil were chasing him. Since then, every day, Maria Elena prepared an extra plate, chicken and rice, lentil soup, whatever was warmest and most nutritious. She placed it in front of him without a word, because she had learned that words sometimes hurt more than blows. The protocol was simple. Social services needed evidence, formal complaints, testimonies. But how do you report a mother who hits when the child has never told you she hits him? How do you call the authorities when your only proof is the way a child eats as if it were his last meal? Maria Elena had tried once. She dialed the child helpline. "What is your relationship to the minor?" they asked. "Have you directly witnessed any act of violence?" No. She was just a woman who saw bruises that faded and appeared like seasons. She hung up the phone. The system had its rules, and the intuition of a neighborhood cook was not valid evidence. Father Miguel had noticed Diego during Sunday Mass. The boy sat in the last row, always alone, in a shirt that was too big for him and shoes that had seen better days. What struck him most was not his poverty but his silence. A silence so deep that it seemed to swallow the prayers around him. "He's Carmen Herrera's son," Doña Rosa had told him after Mass. Poor woman, she was left alone when her husband left. She works 3 jobs to support the child. Father Miguel nodded, but something didn't fit. He had seen single mothers struggling. He had seen poverty. He had seen desperation, but he had never seen a child who seemed to apologize for existing. One day, Diego approached the confessional. Father Miguel waited, but the boy only whispered, "Father, is it a sin to be afraid of your mom?" The question pierced the priest's heart like an ice splinter. "No, son. It is never a sin to be afraid when someone hurts you." Diego said nothing more. He just ran off. Since then, Father Miguel began to inquire discreetly. He visited the neighborhood, spoke with shopkeepers, observed. And that's how he met Maria Elena, the woman from the restaurant who fed the boy every day without asking questions. "I see it too," she confessed to him one afternoon. "That child carries something too heavy for his small bones." Father Miguel had baptized Diego 3 years earlier. He remembered how Carmen had held him, how she had smiled for the photos. But he also remembered something in her eyes, a hardness that did not match the joy of the moment. "We have to do something," he murmured more to himself than to Maria Elena. But what? How do you save a child who never asks for help? Officer Sandra Morales had patrolled that neighborhood for 12 years. She knew every corner, every business, every problematic family. When she received the first call about strange noises, in Carmen Herrera's apartment, she didn't give it much thought. Neighbors always complained about something. She knocked on the door. Carmen opened with a perfect smile, the kind of smile Sandra had learned to distrust after so many years on the streets. "Any problem, officer?" Diego was behind her, clinging to her leg like a shadow. "Just a routine check. Neighbors reported some noises." "Oh, we were moving furniture," Carmen replied without hesitation. "Right, Diego?" The boy nodded quickly, too quickly. Sandra wrote in her report, "False alarm, family cooperative, no signs of domestic violence." She had seen the clean apartment, the solicitous mother, the seemingly healthy child. Protocol fulfilled. But that night Sandra couldn't sleep. Something in Diego's eyes haunted her. An emptiness that was not normal in an 8-year-old child. She had seen that look before, in abuse victims who had learned to be silent to survive. She returned twice more in the following weeks. Always the same scene. Carmen perfect, Diego silent, apartment impeccable. Always the same report. No evidence of mistreatment. But Sandra began to notice details. How Diego flinched when Carmen raised her voice. How he never spoke in his mother's presence. How his arms were always covered, even on hot days. Maybe I'm paranoid, she told herself. After all, not all shy children are abused, not all strict mothers are abusive. But the doubt had taken root, and Sandra knew from experience that doubt rarely lies. Maria Elena decided to break her silence. She couldn't continue to be just an observer while Diego faded a little more each day. She began to take discreet photos of the boy's bruises, to write down dates and times in an old notebook she kept under the counter. March 15th, bruise on neck, finger-shaped. March 18th, scratch on cheek, says he fell. March 22nd, didn't come, first time in 2 months. Each entry was a small betrayal of the silence that had protected them. Meanwhile, Officer Sandra Morales had begun her own parallel investigation. She reviewed call records from the neighborhood, spoke with Diego's schoolteachers, visited neighbors off duty. What she found disturbed her. A pattern of behavior that had gone unnoticed because Diego never caused problems. "He's the quietest kid in class," the teacher told her. "He never participates, but he doesn't bother either. Sometimes I find him sleeping at his desk. When I ask him if he's okay, he just nods." Father Miguel became the involuntary link between both women. In the confessional, he listened to Maria Elena's anguish. "Father, is it a sin to do nothing when you know a child is suffering?" And in the streets, he crossed paths with Sandra, who subtly asked him about the neighborhood families. Time was running against them like sand through their fingers. Each day that passed, Diego seemed more fragile, more absent. Maria Elena increased the food portions, as if she could feed not only his physical hunger but also the emptiness in his eyes. Sandra intensified her patrols, appearing casually near Carmen's apartment more often. But she needed more than suspicions to act. Both paths converged towards the same terrible truth. The system protects those who know how to play by its rules, not those who most need protection. It was a Tuesday when Diego didn't show up. Maria Elena waited until 5 in the afternoon, cleaning the same dishes over and over, looking towards the door every time the bell rang. The chicken and rice plate cooled on the counter like a broken promise. He didn't come the next day either, nor on Thursday. On Friday, Maria Elena couldn't take it anymore. She closed the restaurant early and walked the 6 blocks to the building where Diego lived. She climbed the concrete stairs that smelled of dampness and despair until she reached apartment 3B. She knocked on the door with trembling hands. Carmen opened, surprised. Behind her, Maria Elena could see Diego sitting on the floor, too still with a bandage on his forehead. "What do you want?" "I came to see how the child was. He hasn't come to the restaurant." "Diego is punished. It's none of your business." But at that moment, Diego's eyes met Maria Elena's. And in that look, she saw something that broke her in. Half pure gratitude. Gratitude for having been seen, for having been fed, for having mattered enough for someone to ask about him. "I just wanted to make sure he was okay," Maria Elena murmured, but her words were directed at Diego, not Carmen. The child's lips moved soundlessly, forming two words only she could understand. "Thank you, ma'am." Carmen slammed the door shut, but it was too late. The moment had existed. The connection had been real. Diego was no longer completely alone in the world, and Maria Elena could no longer pretend she didn't know what she had to do. That night, for the first time in months, Maria Elena didn't sleep. But it wasn't due to guilt. It was due to determination. Diego's teacher, Elena Ruiz, had kept silent for too long. When the boy arrived at class with a bandage on his forehead and a story about falling off his bike, something inside her broke. Diego had never mentioned owning a bike. That afternoon after class, Elena opened her desk drawer and pulled out a folder she had been filling for months without fully realizing it. Diego's drawings, houses without windows, faceless human figures, perpetually black skies. School assignments where he wrote phrases like, "My mom is tired," or "I like to be quiet." Most revealing was an essay he had written 2 weeks earlier, about my favorite day. "My favorite day is when I eat at Mrs. Maria's restaurant. She doesn't yell at me and the food is warm. I wish I could live there." Elena picked up her phone and dialed the social services number. This time she had documentary evidence, behavioral patterns recorded over months, photographs of the child's work. While Elena compiled her report, Officer Sandra Morales received a call that would change everything. A neighbor finally had decided to speak. "Officer, last night I heard terrible screams from apartment 3B. And then, silence. A silence that scared me more than the screams." Sandra rushed to her patrol car, but the evening traffic kept her trapped on the congested streets. Her radio crackled with other emergencies, other priorities of the system that always seemed to move too slowly when children were in danger. Father Miguel, meanwhile, had contacted Maria Elena. "We have to act now," he told her on the phone. "We can't wait any longer." All the threads were tightening at the same time, but the clock kept ticking, and in apartment 3B, Diego was more alone than ever. The social worker, Carmen Rodriguez, received 3 calls in 1 hour. Teacher Elena Ruiz with detailed documentation, Officer Sandra Morales with neighbor reports, and an anonymous tip from a local restaurant. After 2 years handling similar cases, Carmen knew when coincidences stopped being coincidental. "I need an immediate protection order," she told her supervisor, Marta Salinas. "I have enough evidence from multiple independent sources." Marta reviewed the documents with the tired expression of someone who had seen too many cases. "Carmen, the mother, has no record. She works 3 jobs, keeps the child in school, pays her rent. The apartment is always clean when inspections happen. But look at the child's drawings, read his compositions. Drawings are not legal evidence. We need something more solid." Meanwhile, at the police station, Sandra filled out emergency forms. Her boss, Sergeant Torres, listened patiently before sighing. "Morales, you've been to that house 4 times. You've never seen direct aggression. Social services need more than suspicion. Sergeant, that child is screaming for help with his silence. I understand your frustration, but we can't act based on instincts." Carmen Rodriguez's phone rang again. It was a voice she didn't recognize. "I'm Maria Elena Vasquez. I have photos, dates, 2 months' worth of evidence. That child comes to my restaurant every day with new bruises." For the first time in hours, Carmen felt she had what she needed. "Can you come to my office right now?" "I'm already on my way." The system, slow and bureaucratic, was finally beginning to move. But outside, the sky was darkening, and somewhere Diego waited. At 7:47 p.m., 3 vehicles stopped in front of the apartment building. Carmen Rodriguez held the temporary protection order in one hand and her heart in her throat. "Officer Sandra, Morales accompanied her along with two supporting agents. Maria Elena had insisted on going too. "Let me talk to him first," Maria Elena requested. "He knows me. He trusts me." They went up the stairs in silence. From apartment 3B, the sound of a television could be heard, too loud, as if trying to cover something. Carmen knocked on the door with authority. "Social services, open the door, please." The silence was immediate. The television turned off. Slow steps towards the door. Carmen Herrera opened, but this time her perfect smile had disappeared. Her eyes darted from one officer to another, calculating, weighing her options. "We have a temporary protection order for Diego," Carmen Rodriguez announced. "We need to see him now." "He's not here. He's with his grandmother." "Mrs. Herrera, we know he's here," Sandra interjected with a firm but not aggressive voice. It was then that Maria Elena stepped forward. "Diego? It's the lady from the restaurant. Can you come with me? I have hot soup waiting for you." A small sound came from inside the apartment. A stifled sob. Carmen Herrera closed her eyes, defeated. When she opened them, tears were streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to hurt him," she whispered. I didn't know how to stop." Sandra entered the apartment and found Diego hiding under the dining table, hugging a pillow. When he saw Maria Elena, he extended his small arms towards her. For the first time in months, Diego spoke. "Can I go with you, Mrs. Maria?" The helicopter that had landed in the restaurant parking lot that morning belonged to a news crew. Someone had leaked the story. But that night, all that mattered was that Diego was safe. 6 months later, Diego still sits at the same corner table. But now he smiles when Maria Elena serves him his plate. Now he asks about the ingredients, helps clean the tables, and sometimes even laughs when other neighborhood children come for lunch. His mother, Carmen, is in intensive psychological therapy. She wasn't a monster, she was a broken woman repeating the patterns of her own childhood. The system that took so long to listen also offered her a second chance to heal. Officer Sandra Morales changed the protocols in her district. Now reasonable suspicion carries the same weight as physical evidence. In child abuse cases, "Children speak in ways we don't always understand," she wrote in her final report. Father Miguel baptized Diego for a second time, symbolically. He called it rebirth. A new life built on the foundation of those who dared to see, to act, to break the complicit silence. And Maria Elena continues to cook, but now she knows that feeding bodies is just the beginning. Sometimes we feed souls, hopes, futures that were about to be extinguished. The news helicopter recorded the story, but it missed the most important part. That the real news wasn't the spectacular rescue, but the months of silent gestures that made it possible. The meals served without questions, the doubts that turned into action, the faith that persisted when the evidence was scarce. How many Diegos are sitting at restaurant tables, school classrooms, or bus stops near you? How many times have you seen something and chosen not to see? The question isn't whether you can save the world. The question is whether you can see the child silently asking for help, waiting for someone pleased to notice that they exist.